So, Jason is looking at this week through the lens of the gifts of love, and after a series of events that happened, the title that I have is Gifts of Love, the Gift of November. And if you have the bulletin with you, there is a big block of scripture from Luke 1, 39 through 56, and I'm going to be referencing that in parts throughout this discussion, but as Jason mentioned, this is part of the Advent story, and it's probably useful for you to use and read and meditate on as well. So, the gift of November. A few things as we get started. First, in this dark season, it's important to remember that the creator and sustainer of all reality loves you. Now, to preempt the question, what do you mean it's a dark season, John? So allow me to clarify. In this season, where we are literally confronted with more darkness and light, it gets darker sooner. We go to work and come home in darkness. Our free time is spent indoors as it is too cold, and I have to laugh at that every time I'm in southern Utah because this isn't cold. We're literally shaded from the light. And we see the impact of that, right? We have biological and psychological conditions that show that people are impacted by the darkness. It's one of the reasons why the early church established a fasting period prior to Christ's Mass. Less about the actual day of Jesus' birth and more about the realization that in our time of need we should turn to God. Deny yourself, including the voice that says you are inadequate, not enough, weak, broken, insufficient. That dark side of you. Deny that too and follow Him. But God loves you. He moves to you. He sees you perfectly, clearly, and wholly. He loves you. As part of my contribution to Advent, I'm looking at some of the figures throughout church history, and this week the quote comes from Anthony Campbell, a 20th century Australian scholar on the book of Samuel. In his book, God First Loved Us, he says this: "How radically is our image of God reshaped if we take seriously the belief that God as deeply, passionately, and unconditionally loves us. How radically must we rework our own self-image if we accept ourselves as lovable, as deeply, passionately, and unconditionally loved by God?" The good news for the world during the season is this: that the absolute goodness of our Creator and the absolute horror of the cross is presented both of us simultaneously. Christ died for the ungodly. Christ died for us. And to forget that during the hustle and bustle of the season is a grave mistake. Second, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to come and speak from time to time. I know the way that I do things isn't normal. Not much about me is normal anyway. I read. I lean on the patristics and the church fathers. I look at different parts of our faith and our larger faith community, and I even make pop culture references. I know that referencing anime and Augustine during a talk like this is unusual for a Bible-believing, non-dom rule-ish church. But it's good to have different perspectives. It's good to disagree and have friends who will be doing scriptural parallel references as you talk. Thank you, Kevin. I deeply do appreciate the work that you do with that, by the way, my friend. It's always a joy to see the connections you make. You've helped me see God clearer because of the work that you do. But I see a problem with a church service where we don't walk away challenged, doubting, or curious about a topic. So if you find me problematic, pray for me. Heaven knows I need all the prayers I can get. But pray for yourself too. God uses the foolish to help unend the wise, and we philosophers are nothing if not foolish. So if you've been keeping track, this is the third year that I've spoken during Advent. The first was a letter to my mother where I discussed anticipation and God working outside of expectation. Last year is a letter to my father and brother, thanking them for their service as pastors in their community. This year it's another letter, and it's going to be an awkward one because it's a letter to my wife. If you don't know Ellie, she's the beautiful redhead that's sitting back there. She's a major introvert, and she doesn't know that I'm doing this. So I'm sorry, my love. The gifts of love, part 2, the gift of endurance. A letter to Michelle. Dear Michelle, this past month has been awful. You know this. It started the weekend of October 26th when I suddenly started having severe muscle pain. It hurt to move. It hurt to get up and down out of bed. I was needing a walking stick to literally wedge between my legs so that I could move them outside of the bed and then pull myself up. I was needing help even to transition between sitting, standing, and moving in general. My muscles were cramped and so tight that I couldn't even open my hands fully. In case you're curious, I have a photograph on my phone that shows me trying to open up my hands, and this is about as far as I could get because of the stress and pain in my body. They looked more like talons than fingers. Of course, at the time, we both didn't know how close to death I actually was, but looking back, we probably should have been more concerned. It wasn't normal. And while it hurt me physically, I didn't really reflect on how seeing someone you care about suffer might impact you. But it did. Because we all know you had to help me out of bed, right? As someone with several chronic illnesses, I often don't think about how my life impacts other people. I don't understand how my pain isn't always my pain, but it's our pain. I mean, you put up with me. I mean, you always put up with me. I mean, I wouldn't wish having the life of a philosophy professor as a husband on anybody. But when I'm really sick, when I'm in the hospital sick, you're present to it. It drains you too. I think that's one of the reasons why Luke is careful to describe the situation between Mary and Elizabeth. When encountering Mary, Elizabeth's baby moves as she exclaims a praise. This isn't just Mary's experience. That pregnancy isn't just Mary's experience. It's the community's experience too. Where two or three are gathered, so I'm also. So Mary's pregnancy is uniquely hers, but it isn't just hers. It's Elizabeth's moment too. As much as I sometimes get frustrated with the larger body or community of believers, it's something to remember. My pain, in a way, is our pain, all of our pain. The moment we abstract that and run away from it, think about pain only through the lens of divine justice or fool around and find out, we've lost our sense of community. We've lost each other. Working in circles I do while maintaining my faith, I see that a lot. I see a lot of Christians who have forgotten the answer to the question, who is my neighbor, and have forgotten the second most important mitzvah. John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Wrath describes it like this: when I have a little food plus I have none. If from the problem the sum is we have a little food, the movement has action and direction. Maybe put a better way, in Acts 2:44, the writer describes it as having everything in common, the community having everything in common. And that includes my pain. My pain is never really my own, never is my happiness, even in the moments where I feel isolated. And November and December was full of moments for us, wasn't it, love? A sudden phone call from the doctor saying I had to go immediately to the emergency room because my heart could stop at any time. A week in the hospital, being attached to an IV for 20 hours a day because my potassium levels were so low. The frustration and the realization of medication issues and chronic illness. And then after being dismissed from the hospital, a week later, a week of COVID. Because of course I'm going to get sick when I'm on so many immunosuppressants and stuck in a place where COVID is rampant. A week of the two of us in bed, barely able to function. Having to ask the question about how to parent when both parents are feverish messes, well, that became a concern. And let me tell you how strong and how amazing our boys were during that time. They were present, kind, adaptive, all the things you taught them to be. And they endured. They endured their dad in the hospital. They endured their parents with COVID. They endured the stomach bug that happened a week later that put them both out of school for a couple of days. I was a proud father. I am a proud father. For anyone keeping track in the month of November, you may have noticed that we were gone. Now you know why. An emergency stint in the hospital, followed up with COVID and the flu, and that's just the start. I could go on. Michelle, about your dad's failing eyesight, about the added stress of the holiday season. The elves are not going to shelve themselves. About getting things right for the core memories of our children. About the shade of looming questions about my health, about all the laughing we had to do in the devil's face because C.S. Lewis got it right, the devil can't stand to be mocked. To give you an idea, church, of what I mean for the past month and a half, let me tell you about the previous week. Wednesday, I spent 2 hours in a chair receiving a biological agent that could, and could is the operative word here, prevent my body from essentially eating its own intestine. The last hospital visit suggested that my particular medication, the medication that I was taking, that I had spent 2 hours taking, may not actually work anymore. But we're at least trying. 2 hours in an office, constantly monitored because of dangerous/deadly allergic reactions that could take place for a solution that probably doesn't work. A month and a half of my partner and best friend processing the looming doom of an answer to a question about how to fix me. And knowing that the current answer is, we don't know. Thursday, I fasted for 12 hours to get a CT scan done. 2 hours of drinking a liter and a half of this wonderful, if you couldn't tell that sarcasm, tasting liquid that was full of contrast, and then yet another IV in 30 minutes in the scanner. Friday, I got the results. Here's what they told me. In no particular order, I have an enlarged liver, which is probably a side effect of all of the steroids I'm taking, go-go immunosuppressants. A benign growth on my liver, benign growth on my kidney, calcified elements in my spleen, gallbladder stones, a hernia near my navel, likely due to previous surgeries tied to my chronic illness, a hernia at the end of my digestive tract, again tied to a previous surgery, a hernia that they described as having fat in it. And I don't know why they took the time to say this particular hernia has fat in it. I don't know if it's a compliment or something I should be afraid of, but that's how they described it. And after listening to them for about 10 minutes describe all of the results of this particular CT scan, I paused and I said, so wait, are any of these actually related to why I was in the hospital? No. I think I'm getting to the point where I need to get a punch card, get 10 physical issues, and get a free dozen donuts from Pink Box. I think that's particularly fitting because they have those poo-shaped donuts, which is particularly fitting for someone with my kind of Crohn's. If you've spent any time with me at all, you know that I'm a hard person to love, and I'm even a harder person to be married to. You all have spent more than 5 minutes around me, you'd know that. So many issues, and not even the right ones. And all the time I'm here at church, big smiles, who always wears the Mr. Rogers t-shirt. I have to have it all together. But Michelle, today I wanted to tell you about a moment where I fell apart. It was back when we had COVID and I was driving to pick up Gabriel from school because, of course, our boys are still going to school. You see, I was following behind a particularly distracted driver, and that's one of the things that really irked me, distracted driving. So here I am, sick with COVID, all of the wonderful symptoms, and the person in front of me is swerving, going between 10 miles under and 15 miles over the speed limit, weaving between the lanes, and they kept taking the same turns I did. I couldn't escape them. I was really being presented with something that just, And so finally we get to an intersection just ahead of us, and the light turns to yellow and to red. And this distracted driver just drives right on through. No cop to pull them over. No car honk from the cross-moving cars that they almost nearly hit. No punishment, no justice. And I found myself literally crying out to God, how is this fair? Now, truth be told, I said some things other than that. I really need a t-shirt that says, I love Jesus, but I cuss a little. But in that moment, the weight of everything hit me. Why? Why do I, you, and this whole community have to carry this thing? At what point does the scales tip and I get my free dozen pink box donuts. When does the justice start flowing? This is my gift of November. Why does this Yahoo ahead of me continue to endanger everyone without repercussions, and I'm now paying for a week in the hospital because my medication just suddenly stopped working? I'm reminded of the book of Job, chapter 3, verses 20 through 26. Why is light given to those in misery and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave? Why is life given to man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? From sighing has become my daily food. My groans pour out like water. That I feared has come upon me. That I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. But after sitting there and waiting my turn for the light to turn colors, and after crying out why, I said, I believe. Help my unbelief. For those who don't know, the words are uttered by a father, very similar to your situation, Michelle, who is doing everything he can to help his son in Mark 9. The healers and religious figures have tried and failed to address a long-term condition of his child. Now, whether this condition is a possession or a description of a complicated medical condition is irrelevant, because in the end, it's a father who like you, Michelle, has lived alongside someone who they love deeply, who is living an incomplete life. Another variant of Job's plight, another month of November, help my unbelief. Because after all, theodicy is a tricky wicket. For those who don't know, theodicy is the problem of evil. Why would a good God allow evil to happen? Why Job? Why a child with mental health issues or possession? Why Crohn's? And to be clear here, I've read and heard a number of extensive discussions on this. And I have found that any attempt at a solution during a Sunday sermon has been awful. Whether it's an answer like God uses all things for good, or it's a sign of divine justice and original sin, these arguments are all incomplete, including the one that I'm giving now, and disingenuous at best, or heretical at worst. By the way, a friendly tip for you. If you're ever confronted with a friend who is asking these questions, it might be a good idea to return to Job 2:13, where Job's friends only started screwing up when they opened their mouths. You don't have to have the answers to why I and others suffer, no matter what you think your reading of Romans 8:23 is. God does, I believe, help my unbelief. The last time I checked, you are not him. And by the way, in case you're curious, I'll be doing another reading group in the upcoming months on another attempt to address this question by reading Augustine's On Free Choice of the Will. It's a sin of pride to encounter suffering and try to fix it without being present or attempting to understand it. Theodicy is hard, and when you are confronted with it, perhaps you should avoid thoughts and prayers and do a little bit more being still and knowing that I am God. So, my love, it has been a season where the gifts that have been given are hospital stays, weeks of immobility, tons of stress, frustration, isolation, and anger. What a time, right? What a time. This is a season of darkness where we talk about light of the world. This is a time of year where the resources are short and we work to sharing those with others. We have little food. See the stockings that we give as a community. We have everything in common, as Acts says. Our immediate family and our larger traditions, our obligations to the church, and our need to recharge, to work overtime, to pay for all of those traditions. So much going on, so much pulling, it's tearing us apart. I would make the case that we see this in Mary, in the Luke reading for today. She's visiting family, but in her song, she's glorifying God. But within that passage, there's tension, at least under the surface. She references Abraham and the mercy shown to him. So what kind of mercy? All mercy. Abraham is another figure of tension. He cheated on his wife. He gave his wife to another man. He hid the fact that he was married to her. He abandoned his biological son. He was willing to perform human sacrifice. And I know that it's more complicated than that. Yes, I've read Fear and Trembling, and you should too. In fact, if you read through all of Hebrews 11, you will find individuals like Abraham, who are inherently broken, flawed, vulnerable, lost people. People who did not receive the things they promised. Who did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on the earth. Yes, the author of Hebrews says that they were prepared a place by God, but they did not receive what was promised. Tension with Romans 8:23 again. And this is Mary too. What gifts did Mary receive? Isolation from her community, skepticism about her pregnancy, eventually being a foreigner in a land far away from her family, see the flight to Egypt, forced to witness something that no parent wants, the systematic torture and killing of her son. Being forced to be grafted into a family of John, behold your mother. All of this with a song about Abraham that is coming from a girl who is only at most just a couple of years older than my eldest son, and likely is probably about his age. The fact is, Mary's unspoken life seems a lot more like mine, like yours, Michelle, than it does a Norman Rockwell painting or the Pietà. And yet she still sings. I see that as the most important takeaway, even though she is ostracized, even though she endures the death of her son, because this is being recorded after Jesus' crucifixion. Even though she is forced to abandon her home, even though. Another passage that Jason is bringing into this season comes from Matthew 7:9-12. Who among you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you want others to do for you, do also the same for them. This is the law of the prophets. Even though all of this, God does good things. God does not give stones or snakes unless it's in my house where we have 5 snakes. God gives good things. So love, don't despair. Our past few months have been hard, but God gives good things. The last month has been a time, but I believe, Lord, help my unbelief, that there is a greater good. God gives good things, but it is a leap of faith. If you haven't seen it, there's a fantastic movie called Into the Spider-Verse. And in the climax of the film, the lead character is about to head into the final battle. But he's scared. He thinks he's not good enough. He doesn't know what's going on. And so he's hanging from the ledge of a building, asking the question, when do I know that I'm ready? And the looming reply from his mentors and the world at large is, you don't, because it's a leap of faith. And so he jumps. And what the scene does is something spectacular. When he jumps, it shows his hands. And from his fingertips, he's scraping parts of the building with him. His fingers tear away the part of the building when he leaps, because he leaps, but he's still terrified. He still wants to hold on, but he still jumps. God, help my unbelief. Through my ordeals, I have learned so much about my body, about the need to help, affirm, and encourage medical professionals, about allowing myself to be served and treated with kindness. I am not happy that things happened, but it is good that it has happened. Author Iris Murdoch makes a distinction between nice and good. Nice is emotional, fleeting, and surface level. It's that smiling family that you put on all of your Christmas cards. Good is something that foundationally changes you for the better. Good is childbirth, baptism, and visiting the sick. Good is the resurrection. Good is work. Why else does each day of the first creation story end with its proclamation? This is a season where nice is tempting. A nice meal with the family where you don't talk about religion or who you voted for. A family picture posted on Facebook. A quick conversation with someone who used to attend this church and then left because of foundational disagreements in doctrine. All nice, but not necessarily good. Believing that it is believing that it is for our good is an act of faith. And by faith here, I mean the kind of faith that Kierkegaard describes in Fear and Trembling and what we see in the figure of Miles Morales and Into the Spider-Verse. It is something that moves us past resignation. In my case, it means moving from, I am sick, I will be sick, it is my lot in life to be sick, into a transformational world. My unbelief is transformed into, I am, with my Crohn's, an image bearer of God. I am, with my immobile neck, fearfully and wonderfully made. I am a contributing member to the body of Christ. I do not need to be fixed. And when I die, I will be as God intended. And that may still be with my Crohn's or bad neck. You, and the you here is cumulative, it's me, it's you, it's everybody. You do not get to decide what I am or what normal is. God does. He is the only hope we have. Everything else, as Thomas Aquinas describes it, is nothing but straw. And so, my love, I want to encourage you. I love you. I know that there has been a lot. Energy is low, fatigue and frustration is high, family and money and stress and darkness all surround us. But it's like I always say, God is good and the moon is round. This period of our lives is for good. We don't see it, but this is the season of faith. This is the gift that is given. The hungry are satisfied. The lonely are comforted. The meek inherit the earth. This is the season of the beginning of the fulfillment of that promise. There is dark seasons of hope. God's gifts transform us, even in gifts like November. This is why Abraham is in Hebrews. A monstrous man in many ways, but in the end he is seen as a paragon of faith because of the transformational experience of encountering the living God. We believe. Help our unbelief. Thanks be to God.